Okay, guys. Test, test, test. Hey, let's grab a seat. We're going to get started here in a few minutes. We're 2 minutes past due, and I'll get in trouble. Grab some coffee, grab a donut, and we will get started in about 2 minutes. Hey, guys, let's it's like herding cats. Grab a seat. We're going to get started. Testing, testing, testing. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Here we go. Let's make some more noise. Okay, folks, we're going to talk about a lot of stuff today. This is our RV roundtable, and we do this about every other year. It's been a while since we have done it. I'm Doug Weiler, the president forever and maybe even beyond of the club, it seems like. And our guest today is going to be Tom Berge. Of course, I think most of you know him. And so we're going to do this Q&A, and I think you'll find it kind of informative. Be sure to grab some coffee back there. There's some donuts. Got a little show and tell table that I set up back there. We're going to talk about paperwork as well today, which is really a fun exercise, I think, and discuss a few little things. I got a borescope back there too that you could take a look at, which I just got here a couple weeks ago, and looked at some of my cylinders, which I guess they're okay because I couldn't tell what I was looking at, but that's a handy little tool that we'll look at a little bit later. Oh, by the way, before we go on, this is an old, wait a minute, let me turn the lights off here and see a little bit better. This is a picture of Tom Berge when he was a kid, and there is a flip phone right there. Tom, you still have that? Is that true? Tom just recently moved into... You just got an Apple like maybe 6 months ago, is that right? Oh my gosh, he's moving into the 20th century. Well, you were young too, right? Probably, I don't know. It was 2005-ish, something like that, maybe. One of our early show and tells, I think. Yeah, that's unbelievable. Anyway, I'm going to talk about a couple things here. Vans has been going through this reorganization, as you well know, and I haven't followed it in great detail. A lot of you may know more about it than I do. There was a video put out here last week. How many of you have seen this video, by the way? So looks okay. Most of you have seen that then. I just put down some of the highlights that Greg Hughes mentioned. And I guess the bottom line is the fact they seem to be operating. Kits are going out the door. They've done 375 kits since December. Of course, the video is rather optimistic, which I guess they should be, considering the circumstances. But one of the things, 30% of these reordered kits have been completed and shipped. I see they just published a lead time and a new lead time chart, which looks way better than it used to be. So I can just briefly remember that if you order a tail kit now, it's about 3 months out to get one. So that's way better than it was a couple years ago when it was months and months out. The chapter reorganization was done here the other few days ago. I kind of glanced at it a little bit because it's way over my head. But all in all, it looks like it's relatively promising for the future of Vans. they're back doing tours and things like that. The whole laser cut part thing is still looks good on paper. They've got a website where you can go in and exchange, or however this works, of getting your laser cut parts. We're going to talk about the laser cut part issue with Quick Builds a little bit later on, but which is not quite as promising, I guess. The Lycoming engines are on order. They're ramping up. They're into May. So this whole supply chain issue is certainly better than it had been in the past. There's no doubt about that. They're hiring people, hiring engineers. I don't know for what salaries or things like that. But so they got a number of job openings. So I think that's encouraging. They're going to be at Oshkosh, but not Sun and Fun, as you probably know. And the RV415, which was a real hot topic here a couple summers ago at Oshkosh, is still being developed. It's on development slowed down a little bit, of course, but I think it's going to be coming out, and people want to buy that airplane, I guess, down the road. Van himself, as you well know, put a ton of money into the company. Literally took his retirement nest egg and put it back into the company, which I think has saved it. So I think, in my personal opinion, it's good that Van himself put the money back into the company versus outside venture capital company or who knows what. So I would say that it's a little more good down the road that we're going to have for Van's aircraft. So it's a perspective that way. Here's a little video I want to kick off. 11-minute video from Vic Syracuse. There are probably maybe a half a dozen RV guys in the world, I think, in the country that really have the expertise. Tom's one of them. Vic Syracuse is one of them too. So you've probably seen some of his videos. This one was done about a year ago, and it just gives you an example of maintenance issues and things like this that are just...
Hi everyone, welcome back. Yeah, I know we haven't been real good at updating weekly. We have absolutely been swamped. Don't know what's going on in this industry. It's pretty exciting, but we just literally have a hangar full of airplanes every week. So we're running hard to get things done and forget to take time to show you everything. But this past week, we've had a couple come in here that just have really been standouts, and we wanted to point some things out to you. And it has to do with maintenance and maybe, I don't know if you want to call it uneducated maintenance. Don't want to be accusatory, but we're flying around single-engine airplanes, and it really is important to do things right. This one came into us. It's an RV9 just recently purchased, and he was assured everything was up to snuff and done properly, and the more we got into it, the more things just really stood out as being very problematic. Cylinders were replaced a couple of years ago by an ANPIA. And interestingly enough, intake gaskets have multiple gaskets on it. In one case, they have 3 gaskets on, including a cork gasket. And, I figure I've looked at least 2, maybe 4,000 cylinders so far. Never seen a cork gasket. Can't find a cork gasket part number anywhere. So I don't know what that's all about, whether it's sloppy fit, etc. All the other intake gaskets had intake tubes had multiple gaskets on them as well. They're supposed to use one gasket, okay? So if you're putting on something, got our antenna up on some other things, we started looking around. So the airplane's about 20 plus years old. Looks like it's been well taken care of. The paint looks nice, etc. Magnetos, never had a 500-hour service bulletin done. They are slick magnetos. We've got about 900 hours on this aircraft. So we tore those apart, and sure enough, they did need the 500-hour service bulletin done on those, which includes points, rotary gear, etc. kind of things. So yeah, we've got 2 ignition systems, but you ought to take care of them. We started looking around at other things. The propeller, 20 years old, so that's at least 10 years past what I would say is the furthest you want to go on an overhaul. Yeah, it says 8 years, so maybe we're 12 years past, right? So we pulled that propeller off. Hoses the same way. These are rubber hoses. They have an 8-year kind of, recommended life, and they're 20 years old. These are all pretty hard. If you look down here, this really stood out. I don't know if you can get a good picture of this, Nick. This is an airflow performance injection system. See this diffuser here? It's not doing any good up on top of this airbox plate. This diffuser is supposed to be on this side of the air plate, so it smooths the airflow coming into the fuel servo. That's just plain wrong to have had that on there all these years. Somebody look at it and look at it and look at it. Multiple owners, and it's just been, installed wrong. Look at this anti-splat arrow nose job. You might have to get a shot of that from the front. That's just sloppy workmanship. The reality is, I don't know how much good that will do, actually. So you spend all this money on something, and it's not lined up, in parallel to this strut here. So it's not going to, maybe apply 40% of the preventative force there when the nose gear tries to turn over. I don't know. We had a whole bunch of other stuff. I can't think of anything right off the top right now. Nick, can you?
Not that I can think of.
Yeah, we're still looking and we're still doing things. So that was kind of get your, it's not that, hey, look what we found. It's please pay attention out there, especially for those of you who are second and third owners. Have somebody do maintenance on your aircraft that's familiar with the aircraft and the systems that go on there. Airflow performance systems aren't something that you see in the certified world typically. So they're more prevalent in the amateur built world here. And so somebody coming from the certified world may not even recognize that thing. It looks like a plate, maybe. It looks like a reinforcement ring maybe to hold on the plate. It's not. So again, that's why you want to get somebody that's familiar with your airplane. We have an airplane over here in the background. If you want to walk over here and take a look at this one, Nick. Here's another one. A pre-buy was done in California. You're going to read about this one in Kit Planes and Sport Aviation, actually. It should be out here in a month in Sport Aviation. This was a pre-buy that was done in California. Unfortunately, I couldn't get out there to do it, even though I was asked. It's just too far. And so they actually took a very qualified pilot from here at Falcon Field, luckily, to go out there, bring it back from California all the way to Atlanta, and landed here in Atlanta, and then went out to do what was a final training flight before the new owner could take it down the road to his airport. And they had noticed vibrations coming all the way back from California with this one at various RPMs. And on this flight, which was the final flight before the new owner was going to take it home, upon landing, the propeller, I think it's over there on the floor, and it departed the aircraft. So I'm going to say that again. The propeller departed the aircraft in the flare. Luckily, a very experienced pilot on board the aircraft retarded the throttle immediately, went to apply brakes. Guess what? The brakes failed because the brake reservoir was empty. Should have been caught on the pre-buy. And then the more we got into this thing, it was just horrible. Engine controls here, I don't know if you can zoom in on this, Nick. Engine controls are mounted. They were never mounted to the engine. They are mounted to the engine mount, both mixture and throttle. Dumb. This one you can see here had a brass extension on it. It's actually a turnbuckle. No jam nut here, no safety wire on this. And then it was very interesting. If you look on the sides of the aircraft over there, there are no fresh air inlets on either side of the aircraft. And, it was kind of cool being winter, this time of the year they're coming back. And the new owner told me, well, there was warm air coming out of the vent on the co-pilot side. So that shouldn't work that way. So I traced the duct coming from what would be the fresh air vent on the panel for the co-pilot, and we get all the way to the engine compartment. They're drawing heated air from the engine compartment. Boy, talk about a source for carbon monoxide. And then there was no inlet again on the pilot side, and in fact the fresh air vent on the back side was never connected to anything. It's just sitting there connected to the cockpit. So I can't imagine how hot this airplane would be in the summertime with this glass canopy here with no fresh air at all. And we found a bunch of other stuff in the engine compartment as well. Bottom line is this: what happened on this propeller is, again, somebody doing maintenance that maybe not necessarily understand how things work. They took a metal propeller that was on this aircraft and replaced it with a composite propeller. Now, metal propellers don't require a crush plate. We have that crush plate around here somewhere. But a composite propeller does require a crush plate. It goes on the front of the propeller so it spreads out the torque, the force of those bolts. In this case, they actually added, can't tell when, we can't even tell when this composite propeller was put on the aircraft, but we do know that 20 hours prior to this sale, a new cowling was put on, a Sam James cowling, along with, the books say, a crush plate. We looked at this crush plate, and this crush plate is about 7 inches in diameter versus the required 6 inches in diameter. So this crush plate was actually sitting outside of the diameter of the forward spinner bulkhead. And so what happened over time, you torque those bolts down, and that propeller really never ever seated against the flange on the engine. And if you take a look over here, Nick, we can show you what had happened to the bolts. So here's the bolts. Luckily, they were all lying in the spinner. 3 of them were actually sheared. I don't know if you can see these, Nick.
Yeah.
3 sheared. The other 3 stripped the threads coming out. Again, these people were extremely lucky. I told them I want their guardian angel. I mean, to fly across some of that hostile territory. Not that it would matter when a propeller comes off, but you know, that's pretty serious stuff. So, you know, when you're doing things, as owners of experimental amateur-built airplane, one of the privileges we have is to be able to do all of our own maintenance. Major modifications require, you know, actually going back into phase 1 again. Can't tell that happened with this airplane, but nonetheless, it was a 30-hour later failure. So typically you go back into phase 1 with a major modification, such as a propeller, a metal propeller 2-blade to a 3-blade composite. It's pretty much a major modification. That would require at least 5 hours of flight testing. In this case, that may have not shown anything. However, having an A&P or somebody else around that understands how serious it is to actually change propellers on a single engine airplane, all the proper things that need to happen to make certain that it's safe, it doesn't fall off, get another set of eyes to look over when you're doing that stuff. This could have had very, very tragic outcome. It worked out okay. Unfortunately, it's very expensive for the new owner. Unfortunately, we have an airplane that now requires a teardown on the engine because Lycoming says propeller separation requires a teardown. So there's a, you know, $15,000, $20,000 expense there, plus all the labor to remove it. Luckily, we'll be able to fix all the other stuff that we found with this aircraft. But it's disappointing to everybody. At least everybody walked away. Nobody got hurt. Just ask you to pay attention out there. There's nothing wrong with getting somebody to look over your shoulder. As a matter of fact, if you look over here at this, I'll call it beautiful RV-10, that in fact is my RV-10. It's in for a condition inspection. Notice the propeller is missing. I do walk the talk on requiring, you know, propeller overhauls at least close to the time frame that the manufacturers recommend. Here. Exciting. Thanks.
Okay, let me get back up here and find my clicker. I think it's right here. Anyway, the bottom line of that from Vic is the fact that, and Tom's going to talk about this a little bit later on, some of these maintenance issues with some of these airplanes. Tom's told me a lot of scary stories like that. I'm sure he'll elaborate, but it is pretty amazing. Let's. One thing I want to talk about for about 5 or 10 minutes is paperwork, which we just all love to take care of course, when it comes to these airplanes. I've looked at several airplanes as far as documentation goes and this type of thing, and I've kind of always been a little bit of stickler as to recording the maintenance activities and the building process of my RV-7. So let's talk a little bit about this to begin with. And if you're new to the RV world, in fact, any new guys in here who haven't started building yet at all or don't know anything about this, good, all old guys in here, just like us. But in that case, you may encounter people who want to build an RV and want to get started. Some of this is kind of generic to any kind of home-built airplane, but the first thing I'd recommend is go to Van's website and just kind of familiarize yourself with these aircraft, what they can do and what kind of models are out there. That's a good way to start. The FAA puts out a website, which I've looked at a couple times, and it kind of outlines the process of building an amateur-built aircraft and kind of the paperwork stuff that's required later on down the road. But it's a good place to go. A lot of good basic advisory circulars in this and about amateur-built aircraft kits. EAA, of course, puts out all sorts of great stuff. They've got again, a good place to get going. And what I did when I started my airplane is I started some sort of a log, a builder's log, and probably most of you have done that. EA's now got a great website here, and it looks kind of like this. This is Bob Collins, one of our members, who's building an RV-12, and he's really into this. Some people get into this more than others. You can be a fanatic or not so much, but here you can record all of your narratives about building your aircraft. You can put pictures in there. You can even add up how much it costs, which is really what you don't want to do. But it can be done, and if you're a real nerd like me, it's kind of good to go have that documentation and be able to look back at it as well. I can't imagine how many times I've had people ask me questions, and I realized, yeah, I think I did that way back 12 or 15 years ago, and I have all these pictures, and I didn't take enough pictures, even though there's 700 and some odd pictures in this file. So believe me, when you get old, you're going to forget everything. Somebody asks you, how did you put that cowling together? And all I can remember is it was a horrible experience, and I get PTSD thinking about it, and I tell them good luck and have fun. Call Tom Berge, that's what I tell them basically most of the time. So believe me, take a lot of pictures. We can do that now with our little teeny phones, and it really is helpful down the road. I kept track of everything I spent on that airplane. I know it's really stupid, and even my wife thinks I'm stupid, but I did keep track of that. I did keep the invoices on it. Actually, that's been very helpful because sometimes I'll buy I bought a part for it or something like this years ago, and I dig into it, and that's I found out where I bought that part or whatever what case may be and how cheap it was back 10 years ago, and it's not anymore. So helpful that way. Insurance is another thing you should consider, of course, even during the build. You know, if your building is, you've spent a lot of money on your kit and you got it in your basement and God forbid your house burns down, what about your kit that you just spent multiple thousands of dollars on? So it's a good idea to get a builder's liability or a builder's policy for building your kit. It's not that expensive, maybe $300 or $400 a year. And you can transfer that easily to a regular aircraft policy when the airplane gets done. Speaking of insurance, Tom will talk about this. He mentioned this to me the other day. He had a student that low-time pilot, what, Tom, 100 hours you say, tail dragger time? Or no, it was not. Young man, right. Wow, 10 grand. When he told me that number, yeah, I thought that's probably what you pay for a brand new Cirrus or something, but wow, that's can be crazy. As you get closer to the completion, I think those of you who have finished airplanes, you contact the FAA. They give you kind of a documentation package of all the stuff that you need to do to certify your airplane. And it's pretty complete. You go through some hoops as far as there's an affidavit in there. You got to sign a few things to do, but the FAA is very helpful in that regard as far as getting. And again, if you got any questions about this, go to the EAA. They've done it a million times before, and can give you some advice in that respect. EA's got a great flight test manual put out. I got a copy of it back there on the table. You might want to take a look at that. It's really complete. It's been under development for a number of years. And when you get to that point of time, as far as having the first test flight coming up, it's a good place to get started in how to get yourself organized that way. Get your aircraft registered. Get your N number. You can do that way back early. I recorded my old N number a long, long time ago. In fact, I got a little story I'll tell you in about 30 seconds. I wanted to get November 22 Delta Whiskey on my airplane. And the reason I wanted to get that N number not only was my initials, but when I was a corporate pilot, the aircraft I flew, which is a Swearingen Merlin turboprop, was November 22 Delta Whiskey for our company name, Dayton Walter Corporation. So that was 40 years ago when I had that job. I wanted to find that N number, see if it was still available somewhere on that airplane. One day I was on a layover in New York when I was flying for the airline. Bought my USA Today like all airline pilots do. And there on the front page was a picture of a crashed Merlin 3 at Teterboro Airport, half burnt up. And the tail was still visible, and it was November 22 Delta Whiskey. It was my old airplane. So years ago, got sold from the company. Some rich dude bought it, didn't know how to fly it, had an engine failure, trying to get it back to Teterboro, kind of plopped it onto the runway. Fortunately, he got out of it before it caught fire. So I got a hold of this guy to see if I could get that N number, because airplanes burn up. And he said, well, I want to keep it, because I think I might get another one someday. So anyway, I couldn't get 22 Delta Whiskey. I got 722 instead. So anyway, you can get an N number, reserve it for $5 or $10 or whatever it is, and then later on transfer it to your airplane and get a personal vanity plate. State registration, you got to do that too. This is the painful part, paying sales tax. I don't think you can get around this anymore. I'll give you a personal story. At the time when I'd finished this airplane, I contacted the good old state of Minnesota Revenue Department, because even though I live in Wisconsin, I have to pay sales tax on the location that the airplane is based at. So you got to pay Wisconsin sales tax, or Minnesota. So I wasn't very honest, of course. I mean, one thing is you buy these parts for your airplane and pay sales tax as you go along, and be real honest that way. Of course, I waited to the very end. And if you look at the verbiage right here, and this, I looked it up, and this still is expressed just like that even today. It says if you buy a kit or parts to build your aircraft and the seller does not charge sales tax, you owe it. Put the cost of the kit or parts on the line of the form. So that was kind of a question to me, and I called up the Revenue Department, and they said, yeah, put the value of the kit, the prop, and the engine. And I thought to myself, oh, I'll do it, because that's half of what I got in this airplane probably. So the kit at the time was like $25,000, and so was the engine, and the prop was $7 or $8, and I was happy to pay sales tax on about $50,000 instead of whatever it was. I don't know if you can get away with that now. Maybe some of you guys can enlighten us, but can't get around it. Wisconsin does the same thing, so that's how it is. Other paperwork, I got some, you can go nutso on this stuff. You could put together an operations manual like the big guys have. I don't have such a thing, but you see them online. People have done that. Checklist, condition inspection reports. I have, and again, you guys can look back there at some of the documents I have. I have all the annual inspection reports for the history of the airplane. Things like, obviously, your logbook entries for pitot-static, service bulletins, ADs. I'm a stickler on oil analysis. I've always done that, and I got a record of the oil consumption and analysis of that airplane. The reason I'm kind of a stickler on it, when I had a Citabria, oil analysis found out I had a bad rusting up engine, which was producing a lot of iron and bad stuff in the and we ended up having to repair that engine. There's a lot of great resources out there. Vans Air Force, which is, I think you're all familiar with. There's a bunch of other stuff now that I don't even follow, but there's stuff online, on Facebook. There's other newsletters for the Vans world. So I think if you're building these airplanes and flying them, it's helpful to stay enlightened and current. So the bottom line is, document your airplane. Keep track of it. It's kind of a pain. It's not much fun to do that sort of thing. but I find it really helpful now. I bought an RV4 way back when that one of our old club members built, Mike Easley. It was a beautiful RV4, and he built it perfectly, but he didn't have a lot of documentation on it. And I felt, well, I'm spending a lot of money on this. I really don't know what's in there, how he built it, and that type of thing. So someday if you sell these airplanes, because the fact that it's not required that as far as maintenance manuals and this type of thing, it kind of behooves you to produce a good documentation for your airplane. You might disagree, but I think that's one way to do it. And last thing, Vans, I don't follow their website in great detail, but they've got a great section here on the technical Q&A on their website, which I discovered a lot of narratives on down here about a lot of stuff that people ask. You know, how do I fix a heavy wing on my airplane? How do I do this, this, and this? So Van has a lot of little technical sheets and papers that have been done that are helpful in that respect. So just a thought once you get going. So let me introduce Tom again. Tom Berge, I think all of you know him. He's our local tech counselor. He's done more stuff with RVs than we'll ever imagine. And he's going to tell us a little bit about the story of this RV12, and then we'll have a Q&A. Tom, you're on the air, and push your button.
All right, we got our. All right, everybody hear me all right?
How's that sound?
Oh, that's right. All right. Balaji, a gentleman from India, he was my latest primary student, actually the second one I've ever done. And he just got his light sport license last summer. So took a little while to get him trained, but you know, that's just the way that part of it goes. Oh, how do I do this now? Oh. This, unfortunately, is a text I got from him on Labor Day of last fall. He does. You want me to stop for a second here? Yeah. Yeah, it's windy out. Arrive early.
Yeah,
And
I
park,
know.
and park in front of Doug's.
Yeah, I parked.
Yeah.
Bernie, how are you? Kevin. You're Tom, right?
I think so.
We talked about you.
I'm sure you do.
Isn't Balaji here today?
No, he's in LA.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Got a cover shot of Balaji's airplane in my hangar. It's like, boy, you look like that now.
No.
There's a bunch of guys at my airport. Thanks again for taking my call when I was on the ground in San Antonio. That was really helpful. I was fixed within hours and I was in the air that night. That was really cool. The fellow that we met before was Hanger when Boeing was closed. I think he was thinking about popping. If you can point him out before the day's out, that would be great. Thanks.
I know you told me to just use plate nuts there. Did you just use the hinges and then put the plate nuts in the hinge material?
This is what I've seen somebody do. I haven't.
Oh, I thought you said you did plate nuts in yours.
I do not in mine.
Oh,
But I
okay.
would do when my hinges fail the next time.
Okay. So,
He just has the metal that goes all the way across.
yep. So you use stainless steel like the hinge? Or,
You can use 063 aluminum.
okay.
That's the same thing that's underneath here. It's 063 aluminum.
Okay.
That's what the sockets are.
Right, that's what the sockets go in, but I mean, Vance has used the hinge.
Yeah, Vance has you use the hinge. These are the quarter turn cameras.
Yeah.
And then I don't like cam locks.
Right.
And screws about every 3 inches.
Okay, so you just put in a piece of aluminum strip. 2021?
You can use 60-61. It doesn't really
Okay, but something 3 inches,
Uh,
or that wouldn't be that.
Okay, are we almost all back here, I think?
I'll talk to you. I guess 2 inches would probably be plenty.
Yeah, probably 2 inches.
Yeah.
A lot of students.
Yeah.
I'm going to say what I measured it was.
Okay, and would you do the segmented like they did on the cam locks? You know, they're like little pieces. I didn't think so. Okay, that's okay. Well, what size would you use? 1032 cents? 832?
Because I could always learn more.
He's sitting right back there. Yeah, he's nervous. He's starting to get nervous. The short guy.
Short guy, his name again?
Hey guys, let's get back going again. I think we're back online. Go ahead, Tom.
All right, I think that works. Hear me all right? All right, so this was Labor Day of last year. And if you look right back here, that would be his nose wheel.
It usually works pretty good.
Hello.
Try that for a second. Let me.
Tom is soft spoken, but he carries a big stick.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's good. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, we're going to change.
Hello.
Where's this thing at?
Do it the old-fashioned way. Gotcha. Okay. Let's turn it on. Straight up. I think you're on already.
All right, how's that work? Better. All right, there we go. All right, so anyway, right there is his nose wheel, and on the back table there is the bottom part of his nose gear that was broken off. This was not a good call on my part. The worst part about this whole thing was that his wife was on board. And that, that went really, really bad there. No. But whether she'll ever fly with him again, well, we got to work on that. Oh. All right, so this is data that was downloaded off his Garmin G3X in there. And the red lines were the contacts. So what I taught him when you come into land and if you hit is to lock up your controls and just skip. I mean, the second contact is generally, you're done. Basically, what I'm trying to do is keep your hands from starting to jockey with the elevator, which gets PIO going. And so when he first hit, so he was at 852 feet, and where's the speed, ground speed, where's our airspeed? Indicated it was 55 knots. I cannot deny the fact he was fast. He was about 10 knots fast on his first touchdown. And but then, and these are in 1 second increments, a second later he was at 853, a second after that, still 853. So basically what happened is he skipped higher, and that's basically exactly what we want. We don't want to see him 10 feet back up in the air. And his speed at that point, get back here, he had dropped from 55 to 50. This is where all hell broke loose. And that's where his check canopy light came on. That meant that there was a jar in the thing that tripped the switch. And, when talking to him after the fact, he said if he would have to answer what he thought had happened, he said it felt like he hit a log. It was really strange. His, let's see, I got to find it here again, pitch. So when he first hit the ground, his first contact, he was at positive 5 degrees angle of attack. So that's a nice flare. Nothing wrong with that. By the time he got to the second contact, he was essentially flat. And the problem was he was landing at Crystal on 2-4 right. And to you that have flown into a Crystal and landed on 2-4 right, as you get ready to cross the 1432 runway, there's an anomaly in that surface, and it chucks you around pretty good. And so I've been flying out of Crystal for my whole flying career, and I know enough to get it on the ground and get on the brakes before I hit that spot. That's where he contacted the second time. So what we don't know is what caused that nose gear to come off. What's really interesting is 1 second after that second contact, he's at negative 79 degrees, 0.79, and the second after that, he's at negative 23 degrees. So what happened is he hit, the nose gear came off at the second contact, it pitched him down, and then it launched him back up into the air. And it's interesting, you can sit here and follow the, where to go to the baro altitude. So he hit at 854, 856, 859, negative degrees, and 868. So it just threw him right back up in the air. And he was negative angle of attack as he was going up. So, and then he hit, and that was the end of that. And we don't necessarily know exactly what happened. When I was training him, he was very vigilant to sit and video every one of our lessons. That one he did not have a video on. And right now I would trade all those other videos for this one, just to see what happened with the nose gear. All right, and if you guys want to pass around to look at it back there, it's very, very telling. When the FAA came out, I think maybe 4 or 5 days later to have a look at that, the guy zeroed in on the nose gear right away. And if you look right here, and also right in that spot right there, the FAA thinks that was pre-existing cracks in the nose gear. So why his nose gear came off, you know, if there was a pre-existing crack in that nose gear, that certainly did not help the situation at all. And it got sent off to the NTSB, and they've got a report, but they haven't released it yet, so we don't know if there was indeed a pre-existing crack. What is interesting, though, is you notice obviously that the nose gear is hollow, and to put the nose gear fairing on, what Van has you do is drill 2 holes into that tube and tap it. So this is spring steel, is what this is. And if you guys have ever run a tap, either a tap or a die, anything to do with any type of a spring steel, that is not a smooth tapping operation. That thing just stutters as it goes through. And as I recall from way back when I first built my RV6, in the instructions from Vans, they talk about don't tap stuff because it causes stress risers. And it's interesting because right here you'll see half the hole. And here you'll see the other half of the hole. And that's exactly where this thing failed. It was where the holes were drilled and tapped.
Has Vans changed their assembly instructions?
Not that I'm aware of. So Vans has always been pretty slow at changing stuff. Something like this happened. So, well, was it Doug? We had a RV12 had a nose gear collapse here yesterday, here at Lake Elmo. Yeah, don't know if connected or not. I have no clue. Come on. Nope, wrong way. There we go. All right, one thing, just another shot of it, and you see the threads cut through there. But it's really evident right in here that this has been there a while. At least that's the appearance. So we'll see what the NTSB has to say. All right, so this is the damage that we ended up with. It took the whole bottom of the fuselage. You took the nose gear here. There's the rest of the nose gear. And that's supposed to be angled forward about 45 degrees, and it bent that back up in there and crushed the bottom of the fuselage. It took both Balaji and his wife's legs and pushed them up. So their knees came up towards their chest. And no injuries. Balaji, they took him to the hospital because he had a cut on his leg, and they didn't know if the leg was broke or not, and it was not. So. I don't know. I imagine somewhere. Did he have it on here? Hold on. Oh, wrong way. Uh-oh. Doug, what's going on here? Why can't I go backwards? Huh? It's going forward. Yeah, I'm going the other way. There we go. Let's look. All right. There we go. They have G-force? No, I don't see it. Nope. This thing is uncooperative here. Yeah, I'm doing it. Never mind. Just move along, Tom. All right. So anyway, so here we are. The nose gear had bent up. It crushed the bottom of the fuselage. This skin over here survived. There's a real small little anomaly right in this area, but we opted not to change that skin. The other side was torn, and we had to do that. But now the big thing that we had to deal with is, you'll notice there's a lot of wires on this thing. And this is all Rotax. This is an IS, injected Rotax. And we had to take a lot of pictures to try to remember where all these plugs went, and there were a lot of them. If you guys ever get involved in this, however many pictures you think you've taken, double it. It is never enough. So we got that all off. I was hoping that we would just have to replace the lower, the firewall in this RV12 is that's the lower. There's a shelf right there, and then there's the upper, so it's a 3-component. And what I was hoping is that we could salvage the top component. We couldn't do that. All right, so here's a picture with the bottom part of the firewall off. The rudder pedals, you can see here, this is where the rudder cable attaches. And I think I got another picture that's a little bit better. It bent those up. It took these parts that the cables mount to, and it splayed them out a bit. It cracked the back side of one of these. And the torque tube itself, it put a big bow in on both of them. So we had to replace those. Let's see. Oops, wrong way. Come on. All right, so here we finally got all of the firewall off. I had to take the thing off because the bottom of the top section was all wrinkled, and I was really bummed about that because that meant I had to pull all the wire, all the rest of the loom through the top of the firewall, which was, it's scary. You know, you're pulling all this stuff off. It's this big, thick as my thumb wire harness, and I got to try to figure out how to get that all back in there. We ended up having to put the board on it here because the load coming across here started to collapse this shelf right in this area. And that was one of the problems that we had, because this is like all these RVs, it's a stress skin constructed airplane. So the skin carries part of the load, and here we were removing the skin. So what was going to happen with this structure? And there was a lot of fingernail biting going on as we were dealing with this. Come on. There we go. All right, just another shot from the side. This section of the firewall and up in here got torn, so we were stuck having to replace this whole thing. There, that's when everything other than the side skin had been removed. So, I mean, pretty extensive damage that was done in here. The reason I left the side skin on is because as far as the structural part of this thing, that's the skin that scared me the most. Because we're going to take off a skin that goes from the firewall all the way back to the baggage wall. And that one was spooky to me. Because the last thing we wanted to do is turn around and make more damage to the thing. And by the way, this whole thing is put together with pop rivets. I like pop rivets. They give you this nice hole right in the middle to drill out so you know you're in the middle. It is so easy to deal with. And all of Van's parts fit like a glove. It's just stuck, put on with Clecos, put in pop rivets, and put it right back into place. So we took all the skins we got from Vans, and we took it down to our painter down by Tom Mosby's place, and had him paint the inside the gray color that you see in here before we reassembled everything, because we didn't want to try to paint after it was assembled. Uh-oh, am I going the wrong way again? Come on. No. This thing is going, keeps flipping back and forth, Doug. It's not me. I'm pushing the top. It's going. That's right. Well, now you tell me. All right. All right, here we go. Now we're making progress. All right. So here are most of the parts. These are the corners. This was a main structure up the front that a lot of load bearing to the firewall, and steps were just pulled out to get them out of the way, and the bottom portion of the firewall. The square you see right there is they have these fuel lines that go in, and Vans, in their infinite wisdom, thought that putting those fuel lines onto the back of the firewall with Phillips screws was a good idea. And the guy who put them in thought that torquing them in was even a better idea. And so when I put a Phillips screwdriver on, there was no way to get those screws out at all. And so I ended up simply cutting it out. You know, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And let's see, those are all out. We tried to keep everything in order so we wouldn't get lost in what we had. All the hinges were reused. And here's just another shot of that up in there. This is the lower firewall segment. Fuel drain line we had to remake. All the air boxes for the heat had to be redone. This is that main structure that, this is the center tunnel that goes in where the cables come through. And this ties into a bulkhead that's underneath the knees. So you can see all the damage in here. When we went to pull the nose gear off, we actually had to cut the nose gear off. I couldn't get the I couldn't get the bolts out of it. I couldn't get the rivets out of it. It was just jammed up in there so tight. And this is a picture of the upper firewall. This was the anomaly right here that caused us to have to pull that firewall off. So that was a disappointing day. Now Vans, by the way, on all the pop rivets on the firewall, they did such a beautiful job of putting ProSeal on. I mean, it's just a work of art. Ours is not a work of art. It's effective, but it's not this pretty. An idea of what happened on the forces involved. So these are the two rudder cables, and you can see this bend right here that we had to, and you know, you look at that and you think, yeah, put it up on a vise and hit it with a hammer and straighten it back out. But it's like, you know, it's an insurance company cost. And let's just do this the right way. And why add more, you know, unknowns into the future on the thing? So we had to replace that cable. Now, of course, the cable goes from the front all the way to the back. And we had to figure out how to get this cable pulled through and not have to tear the baggage wall off and crawl into the tail cone. And so and the first problem we ran into was he had ordered an RV12 rudder cable. Well, who knew that the RV12 IS rudder cable was different? And well, yes, it was. So he's got if anybody needs an RV12 rudder cable, he's got one. So what we ended up doing is taking a long piece of electrical wire and put it through the eyelet down here, and soldered the wire together, and we just used the old cable to pull the wire through, and then the new wire to pull the wire we put in to pull the new cable through. And it worked like an absolute charm. This is when it's all back together, engine mount starting to go back on, starting to get all the fuse blocks back on, the wires back in place. And that's actually looking pretty good now. We did this, by the way, last fall. All of his parts that he had to order was before Vans declared bankruptcy. So we were really, really lucky that this came in before. Would not have, because otherwise it would have changed everything. The accident was on Labor Day. We were back in the air in January. Yeah. So we did pretty good. So here, this was the scary part right here. Because we're going from the firewall all the way back to the baggage wall, and we're going to pull all of this support structure off. And it was like, well, crap. You know, what are the loads? I'm not an engineer. I'm smart enough to know that something's going to change. And I didn't want to find out the hard way, because at that point we got a new problem. So I ended up putting a little bottle jack down on the bottom just to take a little bit of the load off of it. And then we proceeded to drill all of the rivets out. And as we did that, put Clecos back in place, and that'll keep the structural integrity intact. Down in this area, I think there were, I want to say there was somewhere around 40 Cherry Max rivets to drill out. And has anybody ever drilled out Cherry Max rivets? Should be no fun. Now, while pop rivets are really nice, Cherry Max are not so much. So one evening I'm sitting there looking at it and studying it, trying to understand the mechanism. And in the end, they ended up being very simple to take off. You need a Dremel tool with a cutoff wheel and a little tiny punch. And all you do is you grind off the top of the rivet head, which has a little metal locking collar in it. You grind that off, and you use a punch and a wonderful tungsten bar. That thing is so dense. And you punch the pin out, and then it drills out like a regular pop rivet. So I figured out the process, and then I showed Balaji how to do it, and I said, good luck, and I went home. And he drilled them all out. Huh? Yeah, I hear that. So now the problem is we have all this skin on here with all these clecos in it, and I still have to take this skin off and put the new skin on it. And so what I decided we would do is we would uncleco about a third of it and cut it. And then I went and clecoed that cut piece back onto the airplane. And then I did the same thing back. We cut back here somewhere, and took all the clecos out, which from about here to here, and cut it. Took that. Once it got cut, put the clecos back in. So we basically just built the structure back up with the clecos. And when we finally got the back end of this thing off, then we went on ahead and put the skin back on it, the new skin, and reversed the procedure. And every cleco dropped into every hole. There was no stress put on the structure at all. And I was pretty happy figuring that part out, because that was a really scary item right there. And this is what it looks like when we had the new skin on. Now, what's really interesting is when you look at the airplane, you don't look at the whole thing, just kind of look at that area, you're thinking, gee, don't have to paint this anymore. It actually looks pretty good. So, all right. This is the airplane now. Bottom cowl had to be replaced, and I remember telling him, as we were building this, he was thinking all this other stuff was hard, and I said, nah, the cowl will be the hardest part. And he now believes me. He's absolutely stunned at how long it took to get that cowl to fit. So his blades were, the prop, of course, took a prop strike, wrecked the blades. That's a composite prop, so it didn't do anything to the engine. Rotax is a geared engine, and I can't remember what the specs were on the runout, but they wanted us to dial the crank. So I dialed the crank, and I showed 1/1000th runout on the crank. And we were, I want to say it was somewhere around 3/1000ths is allowed. I don't know. Don, I don't know what certified are. Yeah. 6, yeah, more. We sent the gearbox in, because after a prop strike, they want to look at the gearbox. The gearbox had 0 damage in it. They replaced parts in it that they would normally replace anytime the gearbox is opened up. So, and new blades, I got a little cost sheet down here, and I think the blades were $1,800 for the pair. So really good price on those. So yeah, here we go, repair costs. So now you want to look at why Vans maybe had some financial issues. The whole fuselage side skin was $72. If you do the math and you look at what a piece of aluminum costs, and then punching it and cutting it, and they got to make a profit in there somewhere. $72 is just not enough. Nose gear leg was $600. And after this accident occurred, Mark and Don across the way, they had same exact thing on their RV-12s. And I looked at them and says, I know what I would do. They now have 2 new nose gears on it without drilled holes in it. So nose wheel, it was interesting, we had to replace the nose wheel, the tire, the axle, the fork. Because during this sequence, it took the fork and it twisted it and bent the bolt going through. We couldn't get the bolt out. So we couldn't save the wheel, which meant we couldn't get the tire off. So we had to get all new stuff in there. Yeah, and I tried everything to get that bolt out of there. This was not having any part of it. And so the axle, fairing, which we're still working on, fork was 248, cable 132. The rudder pedals, when he first went to order this was just about the time that, because we didn't know that the rudder pedals had been bent until we were well into the rebuild. And at that time, I think it was $125, $135 for each rudder pedal, assembling. There was going to be 2 of them in there. And the same thing back to cost. You look at what it takes to, look at those rudder pedals, and the metal, the welding, the powder coating, and a profit for them, and 130 bucks is just too cheap. So now they're 225. And the prop 1,750 bucks, gearbox at 500 bucks. So less labor, and I can't remember how many hours I had with him and I working on the thing, but 4,700 bucks was what the parts cost on it was, which the insurance company's pretty happy about. That we were able to get this thing fixed for that. So, but that was fixing this airplane, and it took us 4 months, something like that, and we're back up flying. And right now, the only anomaly that we have is a charging system anomaly has shown up, and we've been chasing that, trying to figure it out. And we don't know if that's something we did in putting everything back together, or if some component in the system failed. And right now, there's a circuit board in there. That's a van circuit board that we're waiting for the part to arrive. We're thinking that in that area might be the problem, but we're not sure. And of course, since van has a circuit board and Rotax has their stuff, they're each pointing at the other as being the likely culprit to this. So, but what happens is the charging system drops off and a few seconds later comes back on and does not support confidence in the system. So, any questions on any of that? What's that? Yes, they're going to pay for the repainting. They're going to make them whole on this. Of course, after this, him being a brand new pilot and just getting off of the pretty high insurance costs, I think his insurance was somewhere around 4,000 bucks or something like that. He was terrified to get his renewal rate, which just I think is happening about right now. And I think his rate went up $1,500 a year. So if he has another clean year, it'll start coming down rapidly on here. So, anything else? All right, this is from just some questions that have popped up here that Doug wanted to share. This is from Greg Long, RV12 guy. He says, you can read the thing at cruising at 5,300. He doesn't understand why the fuel flow shows 0.3 to 0.0 gallons an hour higher into the wind versus not. Into the wind doesn't bother your fuel flow one bit. This has nothing to do with it. The real telling thing that he has in his comment here is altitude is no more than 1,000 feet difference. Well, 1,000 feet is an inch of manifold pressure. So at the lower altitude, he's making more horsepower. That's a simple answer. More complicated answer is that the fuel flow transducer on an RV12, RV12s, both injected and a carburetor, have a line to the engine and a return line to the tank. So there's always fuel coming back to the tank, and there's only a transducer on to the engine line. So what you don't know is what's your actual fuel flow, because you don't know what's coming through the return line. And as a result, this stuff you can't really count on. It's pretty inaccurate. And then the other thing was slight left rolling tendency. Just so everybody knows, an RV12 will always roll to the left, every single one of them. And they all have a big trim tab on the rudder, every single one of them. Mark, am I right? Yeah. Yeah. So that's just the nature of the beast. So you have to squeeze the trailing edge of the flapper on, which is really hard to do, because you run out of courage as you're sitting there squeezing this thing. Because if you do it too much, you got a new problem. And he wants you to use your hands. I don't know who thinks that their hands are strong enough to do this, but and you're doing it's the whole length of the wing, so it's tricky. But the only option he has is to keep squeezing and hope. This is one of these things where I think that van needs to put an aileron trim system on it, and that makes that problem go away. All right, questions? Nothing? Pay somebody else. I had mine painted in pieces. Trying to get a good color match is difficult. But I could have an auto body shop paint it. So it matches better, but now you're stuck having an aircraft painter paint it, which the price of painting an airplane is. Yeah, same as I did in pieces, though. In pieces.
Yes,
Yeah,
but it was one whole, it was at the same time,
right.
so it was one batch.
Yeah. Yeah, mine was spread out over some time. So it's why I had the problem that I had. It's close, but I spent 20 years in the printing industry, and color is important, and my eye's really good at it. So, you know, I can see the difference. So, but painting, you know, that's a really tricky question, and you know, cost-wise, and I get that, because I think what's a new paint job now? It's 20 or 25,000. Huh?
Yeah, it's at least 20 plus or more, I would think.
I got a student down in Rochester who had this guy in his hangar painted down in Osage, Iowa, and that was painted primarily yellow, nice color, and I think he had a black and a gray stripe on it. I think is what it was, and I want to say that his price was 17. Yeah. So
Yeah, that's a bargain.
he had it painted as an airplane. I don't know what is that what it is now? 2 years up there? Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think they've always been, as long as I can remember. Even Bernie, even when you had it painted, it was a year wait, wasn't it? I think it was about a year. Yeah. Right. Yeah, yeah, they're out there a ways, but you know, you find was it Mark had his painted by a guy down in was it Illinois? Poplar Grove. And what was your paint job? How much did it cost? 15. Yep. Yeah, yeah. About 15, yeah. So it's not, paint is expensive. I mean, just the paint itself, for you to pay $1,000 for a gallon is pretty easy to do. Polish it. You know, I just, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was out in Portland and picked up an RV7 tailwheel that we brought back, and it's in eastern Iowa. This is the guy with the $10,000 insurance for the year. That was a polished airplane. And the problem with a polished airplane is it reflects up into you and heats up that cockpit terribly, terribly bad. So in summer, it's really hard to keep it cool. So there's a guy up in Glenwood, I think that's where it is, up by Alex anyway, and he has an RV8 that's polished. And now he's exploring getting it painted because he just can't stand the reflection off that polished surface. And I think you guys seen in the last newsletter the RV8 that I went and did a pre-buy on down out in Colorado. That was polished except for the bottom, and it was just full of corrosion. So, really, really bad. I mean, it took me till I got into the second wing before it finally dawned on me what it was. When I first seen it on the bottom, I thought it was just residue from the polishing compound. And then I got underneath the other wing, and I'm looking at it, and it's like, huh. I reached up and tried to scrape it off, and I was like, oh, crap, this isn't residue. That's when Don came into play, and I had to send a picture and say, is this corrosion? I'd never seen it like that before. And yeah. That plane was had lived its life in the Dallas area. Yeah, Dallas is way up there, but, you know, you think about it, so the guy goes on vacation. Where would he go to vacation? Galveston, Corpus Christi, you know, San Padre Island down in there, and if you got down, because that, you know, the base of the cylinders on that thing was just full of rust. I mean, deep, deep rust on the base of the cylinders, exterior. And yeah, you could see there were signs that thing had lived in a corrosive environment at some point. So just interesting stuff. So that it? No, we got more hands.
Ed, hey, you got a story about your RV, quick, Bill. Let me give you the mic so we get it recorded.
Yeah, hi there. My name's Ted. I'm an alcoholic. I'm sorry. Sorry,
worse, you're an airplane
wrong meeting. Tom, you did the pre-buy inspection for me out in Lamar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dave and I went out and did that, yeah.
When he sent the pictures back, especially of the cylinder, I was based in Corpus Christi for a number of years in the Navy, and I bought a Harley, and the cylinders just look like that Harley cylinder, so they're just corroded. So it was unfortunate, but thank you for finding that. I'm a owner of a RV8 quick build, fuselage and wings. The idea that we're going to get this built really quickly, and we've been dead in the water now, since the laser cut parts thing appeared. I was on the phone yesterday with Vans. They have not announced any remediation for how to deal with a quick build in which laser cut parts are embedded. So I had emailed Doug to see if we could crowdsource this and see what people think. Is there a way to proceed forward? There's a whole bunch of red-coated parts, major structural components that are recommended to be replaced. They include the gear towers, and then the aft bulkheads, 3 aft bulkheads by the tail. Don't really know what to do, and we're stuck.
Suck it up. I think your only option is to go in one by one and drill them out and put in new ones. I think that's, especially the bulkheads in the back, they're not going to be any fun, but it's doable. Yeah, you just have to be really careful drilling them out. And I did, years and years ago, I bet this was 30 years ago, a guy asked if I'd go out to Hawaii and fix an RV4 that was built here by one of the local builders and was sold to a guy in Hawaii. And on the trip across the country on the train tracks, they ended up damaging their aft 2 bulkheads, the double ones that face to face. And so I had to go and replace those on a finished airplane. And it's doable. So
Yeah, I can see that the aft bulkheads are much more approachable. I have no idea what the sequence of construction is for the gear towers. I assume you build the gear towers first and then you rivet them in place.
Well, that was one of the problems we had with the RV12. So now the RV12 when it's built is built in sequence. And now we were coming into the middle of that sequence, and how do we reverse sequence the thing because we're not necessarily reverse sequencing it. It was, it's just one thing at a time and just move very, very slow. It's the only option you have. So is the on your fuselage, is the top still off of it? Can you still get down to the gear towers?
Yeah, we've done almost nothing on the fuselage. We just took receipt
so it's
of
in
it.
the canoe stage then?
It is, yeah.
So you should be able to, at least, since you can come in from the top and don't have to come from underneath a panel, you should be able to get that out. So
You're saying that get the gear towers out.
yeah. One side at a time, and just you have to move really, really slow.
It's the 2 side flanges on either gear tower.
Right, you just do one side, do the right side, do the left side separately. Getting what out? The tunnel sides. Okay. On the 14A, those are Yeah.
So, and those are, of course, those are aluminum panels that go outside of the stainless firewall and the rivets that you have to drive before you put the two together. And of course, you build the stainless funnel and then you build it on the sides and you put them together and marry them. And so, without taking the entire, really the entire front half of the fuselage back apart,
Yeah. And the risk is when you start drilling out a lot of rivets is elongating holes, and yeah, that always makes it a little bit more tricky.
they have implied that they are working on that solution, but they don't know what it is yet.
Yeah.
So I've got other things to do, like my tail cone. There's some bulkheads there and some other stuff. That's pretty straightforward, I think. Go slow.
Yeah.
So my hope is by the time I get the tail cone fixed, they will have us to use a lot of them.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Tom, is there an inspection procedure for, so he's telling us that a lot of parts are recommended to be replaced, but if possible, to go in there, you know, with a good light of air or night temperature or something, to see whether or not they actually need to be replaced?
As far as the laser cut parts, that's something you'd have to talk to Vans about. I'm not an engineer, and
Once it's assembled, riveted in place, it's impossible to tell whether or not that's a laser cut hole or not
yeah.
until you drill out the rivets. You basically have to disassemble the whole thing in order to just find out if you need to disassemble.
My understanding, the laser cut parts was really obvious with the ones that I've seen that were laser cut and condemned. They had slag all over them and they looked like something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is already assembled.
Some of the parts that have holes that you can fill with rivets, you can. I bought a $20 microscope, USB Bluetooth microscope from Amazon. And some of the parts, if you don't fill all the holes with rivets, you can see. But if you fill all the laser cut holes with rivets, you just can't see that part. You can see the cracks, right?
No. Yeah, well, the crack is going to come from when you dimple the thing, when you put stress on the hole.
So like a bulkhead, where you dimpled it and then rivet from the outside, you look at it from the inside and you see that artifact. And there's guys that are saying, every one of mine is cracked. And mine, I don't see any crack. I see an artifact, but there's no obvious crack. It's an artifact from the laser.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder when they dimple the skin, if that had any way they dimpled it, if that had anything to do with the cracking, or you know, the dyes that they use, because there's different dimple dyes out there. There's so many variables involved in this. Yeah. Sure. Yep. You know, and these things keep. You know, what's interesting about all this is we all get all wound up about all these little tiny anomalies that show up in a kit. And the kits, when we build them, they're built by us, by the way. We're not necessarily perfect beings building these things. But none of these things are falling out of the sky because they're exploding into 1,000 pieces. So just, I'm not saying that there can't be problems, but on the other hand, you know, they're trying to find that balance point in there.
I think one of the issues that, for instance, we have the section 5 clearly states the process for deburring holes.
Yep.
So that you are eliminating any possible defects. And Vans is basically saying, well, ignore that.
Yeah.
It's okay if you have this
Yeah.
I do think that they're not gonna fall out of the sky, except that you still have section 5
Yeah.
that says you should deburr every hole and it should be clear of any defect. You're kind of just ignoring that.
Yeah. No, that's a, boy, it's like there's no win in this situation. There's no way, it sucks no matter what you do. So it's just, it's unfortunate. You know, the way I see it, the worst problem that you have with these things is that you have an airplane that has these parts in it. And when you bought your engine, now I don't know what an engine goes for, it seems like $50,000 bucks. So when you have your airplane with laser cut parts in it, the engine still costs $50,000. And somebody who has an airplane without laser cut parts, their engine also is $50,000. And at some point down the road, you're going to sell that airplane. And that $50,000 engine is going to be worth less when it's on an airframe that has laser cut parts in it. Because people being what people are going to look for every reason to talk down the price of what they pay for something. And that's a pretty glaring example of something you can use to talk down the price of an airplane. So that's the worst part of this whole thing I see. Dale?
These laser cut parts, is that just the skin?
I think everything. Yeah, it's spread throughout. Not part on it, but spread throughout the airframe. Huh? No skins. They were all punched, so it's just underlying structure. Yeah.
That's why actually, the price that you showed for the RV for pull-up side skin, I bet you it's very close to that skin. So a lot of prices for the parts, after Chapter 11, some prices didn't change at all.
Yeah.
Some prices went up 30%. Some prices went up 75%. So depends on the complexity of the part. So
but
flat skin plate is going to be pretty close to what it was.
Yeah, but that's my point on that was when you look at that whole skin and you kind of run the numbers in your head, just Business 101 says that's not enough.
I understand the point. It's
Yeah.
just, if you look at the pricing structure, still it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Because there's not a general pricing.
Right.
Just a comment. Remember 1,000 years ago when we built a 6
Yes, I do.
and we drilled it, we deburred it.
Yep.
Why can't they do that? Why can't they get sheet metal? Is it impossible nowadays to start with just a metal
Just a raw metal.
like we did?
No, you certainly could do that, but now everything, the advantage of the match, everything just goes so much easier and so much more consistent. About an RV6 and RV4 and 3s is if you have something happen, say you something, to replace a leading edge on an RV6 is a really complicated mess because you're dealing with a 6-inch machinist ruler. So, yeah, not a lot of fun. Yeah,
Only scraped his wing on the tarmac.
yeah,
Replaced the whole thing.
yeah.
It can be done.
It can be done, but the fact is now everybody wants it a little bit easier and more consistent. And I look at my RV7 when I built that versus the 6, and the 7 was cheating. It just went together. It just fit. The RV12, every single part that we put on there, every single hole lined up perfectly. And that really makes repairs like this an absolute breeze. So. What? Pardon? No. I mean, they give you pretty much the in the drawings. Don't they have them in there? Other than it happened, I know nothing about it. Like this? Yeah, I don't. But that was a training plane on Fleming, right?
Yeah, I think it was one of the training airplanes from South St. Paul. Oh, yeah.
Not me. I got enough to keep me occupied. No, it's just, if they have a problem with those drilled and tapped holes in that nose gear, they need to fix that. When you look at what happened to Balaji and his wife, that they got out of that without getting injured is pretty impressive. That thing could have gone wrong in a whole lot of different ways. So, well, that's a great question. So, what was first? What came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know. The data seems to indicate that he was flat, but he wasn't that flat. But if he would have hit that anomaly where the cross runway is there at Crystal, and hit it just at the most inopportune spot and time, that could have done it. But just because you land an airplane, a tri-gear flat, the nose gear shouldn't be breaking off on it. Otherwise, we'd have a whole bunch of Cessnas out there with broken off nose gears.
While we're talking about nose gear again, RD6A owner with Anti-Flat and the hub update. With Van's letter talking about possibly changing the mount and the engine mount.
Oh, to put the new style nose gear on with the little rubber donuts on it? I don't know much about it other than it's out there. I know it's terribly expensive to make that change. You know, and not to sound arrogant and cocky and stuff, but the fact is when you land a tri-gear, you're supposed to land it on which gear again? I can't remember. Mains. Oh, the main gear. Stay off the nose wheel. And that's, you know, when I had to go out and fly with Mike Seeger so I could be listed as a transition instructor, they put a lot of emphasis on keeping that nose wheel off. You know, and that's realistically any airplane. I don't even think the Boeings, every now and then they have a video of a Boeing landing on all three. And it pretty well
Southwest Airlines did that at LaGuardia a few years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it just wrinkles the
Doesn't
fuselage.
work.
They're designed to land on the main gear, not the nose gear. Learn how to get the nose up, and then it's fine.
Recommendation for a company to get the vinyl graphics for names and stuff? Does that have to be your company?
I have, I can't remember who did mine. That was done in
My son
Hudson
did, but
20
he's
years ago.
Yeah, that was like when he was a little baby.
Yeah, that's when I still had color in my hair.
Yeah.
So.
No, he's well past that business. So I don't know who could do that.
I would think any vinyl label
Yeah,
graphic
they
shop,
could.
You come in with a line drawing of the fuselage, and they'll be able to work that in and figure out how to do that.
I watched a video that Flight Chops made the other day with an RB-14, and he was taking a fella up and going to do some loops. Did a loop, and all of a sudden he had a overtemp on his engine. He said he wasn't going to make it back to the airport, but they made it back okay, called emergency. Come to find out, it was just a connect. You've had that experience, have you, with connecting bagels?
Oh yeah, I've had connectors go bad. I've had individual cylinders, all of a sudden one of the temperatures spikes out of control. First thing then is look at the other temperature and see what it's doing. Because I have an anomaly on the sending unit is, yeah, that happens. Where's Kevin at? Right there you are. You're hiding on me. Kevin just had an alarm pop off on an EGT. And, you know, everything else is fine. Kept flying the airplane, and when he got back, was it before we changed it, you turned it on, it was showing 138 degrees. So it's just a bad probe. Swapped it out, and we're done.
Well, that reminded me of Alex Peterson always said he would never use anything but a mechanical oil pressure sender.
Yeah.
Connections can go bad.
Connections go bad, but I've had numerous, in fact, the most common transducer failure I've had on mine has been the fuel pressure. That seems to be a real common one to fail. So, when something happens, wind your watch. Think. The engine's still making good power, it's running well, nothing else is showing up. First thing you want to do is think maybe we have an anomaly in the sending unit. Don't be dumb, you know, take that and keep your wits about you and get back on the ground, but a lot of times it's just a sending unit. Anything else? A 6? What are they? I think they're putting the bigger rudders on 6s, yeah. And I don't know if it's just the 8 or if they're going to the 7 rudder on it. So my RV7 has an 8 rudder on it. That's what they originally came out with, and then they switched to the 9 rudder. I just didn't want to build another rudder. Yeah. Yeah, if you put a bigger rudder, because the rudder on a 6 is probably a little bit too small. You get a little bit of a tail waggle in them. Yeah. Yeah, you get they claim there's a tail waggle, and yeah, there is. When I fly in a 6, I don't really notice it because it's normal to me. Nancy, do you feel the tail waggle in your 6? Do you feel tail waggle in your 6 when you're flying? No. No, it's there, but you just get to the point where you just don't notice it.
You kind of call that the bonanza boogie, don't you?
Well, no matter what airplane you fly, it just becomes your new normal, and you'll just adjust accordingly. So it's like you get into Doug's. The difference between Doug's RV7 and my RV7A with the rudder is on his, it feels like you left the rudder lock in again, and it just doesn't want to move. Now mine, you can move my rudder, but the RV9 rudder is really hard to move when you're cruising. Oh, no, you got other problems. All right, that it?
I think that's might wrap her up. Dale's got a question here. Dale.
Okay, I've got a couple of alternators back here on the bench. I've got a David Clark